Hello, I'm Carol Hilty, Superintendent of the Colorado School for the Deaf and the Blind, CSDB. Welcome. I'm happy that you have decided to watch this program. I hope that you enjoy it. We welcome your feedback.
Cookie, cookie, cookie. Bake, bake, bake. Do you want to bake cookies?
Yes. Sugar cookies are my favorite.
Okay, I need first flour, second eggs, third milk, fourth sugar.
Baking cookies is fun. Cookie, cookie, cookie.
Bake, bake, bake.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kristen Huddleston, and I'll be presenting on behavior, basic strategies, and supports. My colleague, Kathy Emter, will join later. The overview of this presentation includes discussing basics, developing positive behaviors, challenges, those challenging behaviors, how do we address those, consequences, how and when, setting limits, some common struggles, and tactile tools that can help in working with children with vision loss. And starting with the basic, I'm sure many of you have seen a hierarchy of needs triangle similar to this one. As you know, the bottom of the triangle are our basic needs, and those needs become more complicated as you go up. When we think about behaviors in our children, oftentimes we will see escalated or negative behaviors when those basic needs are not met. For instance, sleep. They recommend that children ages 7 to 12 get 10 to 11 hours of sleep a night. Children ages 12 to 18 get 8 to 9 hours of sleep per night. If it's been a busy time and your child has not gotten enough sleep, this may be the reason that you're seeing those negative behaviors. Another key basic is nutrition. We all know that it's very important to eat a variety of foods, focusing on healthy foods rather than those easy and sometimes fast snacks and sugars. Routines and schedules. Obviously, especially for our younger kids, but even teenagers, the more that we maintain routines and schedules, the easier it is for students, as it is for ourselves. There are times when routines and schedules cannot be followed, and you will need to set up reminders and help your child with those times. Communication with children is key. Many times in our lives we get busy and just don't take the time to sit down and talk with them. Finding out what's going on with them, how they're doing, or if there are other things that they need that we just weren't aware of. Family time. It sounds like something just for younger kids, but actually they find that having specific family time on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, is very beneficial for children of all ages. When we look at behavior, the ideal start is to develop those positive behaviors, focusing on what we want to see from our children rather than focusing on the behaviors they exhibit that we don't prefer. At school, we set those up by, first, identifying those expectations. What is it we want to see in our students? For example, at school, we focus on positive attitude, on respect, on independence. Those are some of the key words, behavior expectations that we like to see from our students. Once we've identified them, then we teach them, what does it mean to respect? What does it look like? What do I hear from you when you're respecting? What do you hear from me when I'm respecting? Aligning with teaching is modeling that, showing them, letting them see and hear what those behavior expectations look like. Then we practice them, giving the kid, which can be 5 minutes sometimes, time to practice. What does respect look like when you're standing in line in the cafeteria, when you're sitting in class and you're bored with the topic? Practicing those behavior expectations. Next and most important is the acknowledgement, catching them being good. At school, we practice a 5-to-1 ratio, trying to catch those positives, notice them 5 times more than 1 to every 1 correction. So for example, a positive can be, hey, great job. I really liked how you showed your positive attitude during that. Or it can just be a smile, a pat on the back, shaking their hand, acknowledging that they're doing well and they're doing what we asked of them. Lastly, there are times when we have to review those expectations as needed. If there's a big concert at school, if we're having a special luncheon in the cafeteria, reviewing those expectations prior to those events helps students know what they need to do and show those positives. Transferring those to home is the exact same setup. You want to identify those expectations that you want at home. When you're teaching and modeling those, trying to think about the physical prompts or verbal prompts that your child might need and helping them remember what it is they need to do. Practicing again, acknowledging that 5-to-1 as much as you can and reviewing as needed. Despite setting up positive behaviors, you will encounter challenging behaviors. And here are some tips for how to address those challenging. As we said, most important is focusing on those strengths and interests of your child. Obviously not during the challenging behavior, but setting up those times, whether it's a family time, a meal time, where you're chatting with your student about what they did well, what they're enjoying, those kinds of topics. They recommend greeting your child every morning and evening with positives instead of negatives. In fact, one recommendation is called the 30-minute rule. So when you arrive home after work and they arrive home after school, that first 30 minutes just be chat time, catching up on how everybody's day was, things they're looking forward to, things that went well in their day, rather than focusing on things they need to do, how they did on their tests, what kind of homework they have, did they finish their chores, those kinds of more negative focused activities. Great to see you is a recommended way to start that 30-minute rule because it focuses, it's felt more out of love than out of fear. When we say great to see you, we're showing them that we're eager, that we're excited to find out how their day was and to celebrate their day versus focusing on their homework makes them feel it's more out of fear that maybe they don't care about their homework or that we don't think they'll be responsible and take care of it. So it's a good positive way to interact with them at the end of the day rather than those list kind of how did you do, this is what you need to do kinds of things. Similarly, using empathy is a really important step in addressing behavior. Obviously, part of this is setting up that empathy prior to challenging behavior. The statement, I've noticed that. I noticed that you like skateboarding. I've noticed that you're doing really well in your math these days. I've noticed that your haircut looks really nice these days. Picking behaviors that you've seen shows them that you're paying attention and that you want to be involved in their lives. It helps build that empathy with your child when things are good. Then, when you have a situation where they've made a mistake, you can still use that empathy as a tool. For example, if a child breaks a window, you can start with, wow, that's a drag. I wonder how you're going to take care of paying for that. Rather than the typical lecture and, oh my gosh, this is so expensive, and kind of response that often leads to resentment from the child and frustration for us as parents. Next is replacing those lectures and warnings with enforceable statements. Lectures and warnings are tiresome for us and are perceived most of the time by children as being preached at. Enforceable statements take all of that away. Examples, instead of saying, hurry up. You can say, this car leaves in 5 minutes. Instead of saying, clean your room so we can go shopping, you would say, I'll be happy to take you shopping when your room is clean. The consequence is embedded in the statement. It still tells them what's expected or what they'll get when it's done, but it's not about me lecturing them anymore. Now it's about informing them what they need to do to move on. Another example for older students that I liked was, as long as you live in this house, you will never drink alcohol. You could replace that with an enforceable statement, such as, I'll be glad to let you drive my car when I never have to worry about you having alcohol. Same concept, but it comes across much more empowering to students rather than us just lecturing or preaching to them. Next are delayed consequences. Oftentimes as parents, when something happens and we're upset and a consequence needs to happen, we in the heat of the moment can go overboard or not respond as well as we would like to because it's the heat of the moment. Using delayed consequences is a huge tool. It buys us time to come up with an appropriate consequence, to make sure that we're using a logical consequence, and it may prevent explosions in our children. An example would be, I will have to do something about that, but not now, later. Try not to worry about it. Obviously, we do want them to think about it some, maybe even come up with their own ideas for consequences that would match the behavior that they had, that misbehavior. Aligning with that is delayed gratification. An example of behavior that we often see for kids is just them wanting our attention, and typically when we're in the middle of about 5 other things. An easy way to address that and teach that delayed gratification is, I will address your very important issue in 10 minutes when it's more appropriate for me and I can give you my full attention. It lets them know that you are listening, that you will address their issue, but not right this moment. Teaching delayed gratification is very important for children. They found that for children that don't understand that concept of delayed gratification, they can become entitled. It can lead to that, a sense of entitlement. You can also think about it as the responsibility that we as parents have to give children what they need, not necessarily everything they want. You can't develop character if you do not master the art of delaying gratification. And character is one of the greatest things that we can teach our children. So teaching them to hold a minute and then giving them that attention is very important. Lastly, as a tool, is focusing on logical consequences instead of punishments. And this is something that the delayed consequence really helps us to do. We all grew up with more of the punishment type of thing versus the logical consequence. The difference is that logical consequences are linked in a meaningful way to the misbehavior of the child versus a punishment that's just intended to make them suffer for doing something wrong. Taking that time to come up with a logical consequence will help us and them respond to that situation in a much better way. So moving into setting up those consequences versus punishments, 5 tips. Number 1, addressing the reason for behavior. When you're identifying the behaviors that you want or the behaviors that you're struggling with, first figure out why that behavior is happening. Are they using the behavior as a means to communicate? Are they using the behavior as a way to get your attention? And make sure that the consequence aligns with that reason for the behavior. For example, if a child is constantly interrupting you because they want your attention and you're working on teaching them that delayed gratification, when they interrupt you, you could simply take their hand, set them on the couch, and ask them to wait. Maybe not even verbally responding in order to teach them you're not going to respond to those interruptions. They will have to wait to get your attention. As we've already talked about, delaying that consequence, buying yourself the time to think about it. Another thing to consider is asking for help. A lot of times in the heat of the moment, or even when we're thinking about it, we have ideas of consequences, but we're not sure. Calling your spouse or a friend or a parent, a colleague, a friend, asking for help in how you should address that situation is a very helpful idea, and certainly something that we should do more often. Aligning with that is making a plan with help from others. If my child needs to buy a new window, needs to come up with that money, they may need chores to earn money. I might not have enough just around the house chores for them to earn money, but maybe my friend needs their lawn mowed, or maybe I have another friend who's moving and needs boxes packed or moved. Those kinds of ideas where friends can help, and calling them and having that plan set up before I sit down with my student just helps make it more smooth. A big piece in setting up consequences is to really start empowering children to come up with their own problems, their own solutions, solutions to their own problems. Rather than us always coming up with the solution, to start having them think about it. Well, how? Like the example we gave, breaking the window, what a drag. I wonder how you're going to pay for that. Not me telling you, what are your ideas? Kids are amazing when you give them that chance. They can come up with some really creative ideas for how to solve it themselves. If, given time, they still aren't able to solve it, then we probably need to move into that situation where we're giving the consequence if they can't solve the problem. It's okay to give them suggestions as part of guiding them to their own solutions. Certainly, as they're younger, you'll give more suggestions, and as they get older, they'll be able to kind of pick and choose from previous circumstances to know appropriate ones. Another really good idea when giving consequences, when thinking about behaviors, oftentimes we want kids to do stuff for us that they really don't want to do, like cleaning their room, helping mow the lawn. They're really not interested at all in that. We need the help. Sometimes it's okay to phrase it that way with kids and just say, would you do this just for me? That way, they are more likely to do it because they understand that it's you asking it of them versus you telling them they have to do it for their own internal reward when they don't necessarily have that. All right, I think at this time, Kathy's going to come on and talk a little bit about setting limits.
It's important to know that to kind of deal with some of these consequences and kind of avoid the punishment section part of discipline, you need to really ask yourself, how are you setting limits in your house? Setting limit is not the same as an ultimatum. Limits aren't threats, and an ultimatum is a threat, basically. If you say if you don't clean up your room, you're going to be grounded for the weekend, that's a threat. Limits offer choices. More so if you said, if you clean your room, you can spend time with your friends. You're not threatening them. You're not telling them if you don't clean your room, they're going to deserve this punishment. You're giving them a choice. It is their choice to clean their room or not. But if they make that choice, they have some ownership of the consequences. If going out with their friends is what they really wanted to do and they make that choice not to clean their room, then that choice is on them. It's not coming from you as a punishment. You can also say, if you clean your room, you can hang out with your friends this weekend. If you don't clean your room, you won't be allowed to go out with friends. It's your decision. And I'm speaking more from an older student perspective. Kids have the ability to make those decisions. And by making those decisions, they're owning a lot of that power in that decision. And it's not a consequence or a punishment that's kind of doled out by you as a parent. Also, limits are to teach, not to punish. With limits, children begin to understand how their actions have consequences, both positive and negative. By giving children choices and consequences, we are providing them with a great structure for future decision making when they get older and they need to make other choices in their life. They have the practice of making good decisions. Also, limits are about listening, not about talking. Taking the time to really listen and understand your child, you're finding out what's really important to them, what kinds of things that they're really thoughtful about, what they're feeling. And also by listening to your child, you learn more about what's important to them when they make their choices. You can kind of build some of those choices into your statements with them and kind of the limits that you're setting in your household. The next few slides we have are, it's a basic self-assessment. I want you to kind of look at some of the questions and think about how you feel about how you set limits in your house. Everybody that's watching probably has a different idea of what an appropriate limit might be. So this self-assessment is more for you to kind of look at what you're doing and kind of your values about what setting limits are. So the first one is, the main purpose of discipline is it A, to punish for bad behavior? Is it B, to teach my child how to make good decisions? Or is it C, to vent my frustration and anger? So think about how you set limits in your house And be honest with yourself. I think that we think that we're setting limits for all the right reasons, but when we really look at each situation, we might need to step back and be honest with where these reactions are coming from. So think about your answer, and the correct answer really is B. We want to teach our children how to make good decisions. Just a bit of trivia, the Latin word for decision it means to teach or to lead. So if you kind of think about what discipline really means, it's not supposed to be a punishment, but we're really taking each situation and trying to teach our students and trying to lead them into making great decisions. The next question, why as parents do we often go back to punishment instead of setting limits and using logical consequences? Is it A, because the punishment is just easier? B, because when we're angry, frustrated, or hurt, it's our first reaction? C, because punishment works in the short term? Or D, all of the above? So maybe think back to a situation you've had with your child. Kind of think about a time when you doled out a punishment and think about how you were feeling in that moment and why did you choose that punishment? Which one of these answers would you have chosen? And I think we all know that the answer is all of the above. We've all reacted in ways in situations that have happened because it's just an emotional reaction. It's quick, it's not logical, and it is kind of a shoot from the hip kind of reaction. It's what comes out without really taking that time, as Kristen talked about earlier, delaying that time and giving your child some time to think about what's happening, giving yourself some time to think about what's happening, and then also getting on the same page so you can make logical consequences instead of punishment. The last one is, I just want you to think about what it means in your family to set a limit with a child. And like I said, every family is different. Every family has different values, different value systems. So what does it mean specific for you personally to set a limit with your child? And all of your answers may be different. I like to think that setting a limit means providing a child with both choices and consequences of those choices. So giving a child a choice, letting them think about their choice, and then also letting them live with the choice that they made. It's important when you give a child choices like that you give them time to think about the choices. I think oftentimes we're in a hurry. We really want the kids to choose, clean your room or don't go out with friends, or mow the lawn or do the laundry, things like that, but they really need some time to think about it. They may need some help. Maybe they don't know how to do the laundry to the way that you would like them to do it. So you might need to take some time, give them a choice, walk away, come back in 5 minutes. You can even tell them, here's your choices, laundry or lawn. I'll give you 5 minutes to think about it. When I come back, let me know what you'd like to do. You're really empowering them to make a lot of good choices by giving them that time to think about it and then letting them choose the consequences that they can live with. So the differences between setting limits and punishment, punishment comes from our emotion, not necessarily the child's behavior. If you think about the last time your child ran out in the street, maybe impulsively they ran across the street for a toy, our emotion is immediate fear. Our emotion is not, it's a very logical emotion, but however, the punishment doesn't necessarily come from the child's behavior. It's coming from our emotion of being fearful that something was going to happen. So when we feel angry, hurt, or frightened by something that our child has done, oftentimes we allow our emotion, not our logic, to dictate what kind of punishment that child is going to have. It's also easier to think of punishment rather than logic. Logic takes a lot of time. It requires us to be calm. It requires us to look at the situation from the child's perspective and also think about what's important to that child. Punishment is a quick and easy solution, although it's not always effective. Punishment, the next 2 points kind of goes together. Punishment works in the short term and limits work in the long term. Punishment, like I said, is a quick fix for what's happening right now. But if you're setting limits with your child, it's something that they're going to carry with them, not just right now, but they can carry it into their school day. They know how to develop limits within themselves in the long term. Punishment fosters a lot of resentment, especially from my experience with students that are in their teenage years. limits foster more independence as opposed to that resentment. Speaking from the perspective of students who are blind or visually impaired, limits are important. It's important that we keep in mind that if your student is blind or visually impaired, they can have limits, and you need to have high expectations for those limits. Just because a student is blind or visually impaired, sometimes it's easy for us to want to do for them. It's quicker. It saves on frustration for them and for us. However, it's not really encouraging them to be independent. So coming up with some of those limits that we would expect if they have siblings, making those limits as similar to their siblings' limits as possible is a good way to get those students who are blind or visually impaired to have some independence, to feel more empowered, and to also feel more equal as a more equal member of your family as well.
And the next one is common struggles. Bedtime, for example. With younger kids, maybe their bedtime has been delayed for an hour or two. It's important that you bring it back gradually, maybe by 15 minutes each night, and then increase it throughout the evening. Don't do it all at once because it can cause that fight. Really important that you set up a routine. Maybe give them some warnings before bed. You have 5 minutes before bed, you have 10 minutes before bed, and that helps them to accept that more readily. Another struggle is homework. Remember we spoke before about the 30-minute rule. When they get home from school, you don't immediately ask all about homework and all of these different things. First you chat with them. You have that specific time for that. Offer your help. You could even say, I'm available to help you between a certain amount of time tonight, and once that time passes, you wouldn't be available. Another comment you can make to them is let them know that the TV is available once the homework is done. So chores and duties in the house. Sometimes we tend to give them chores and they refuse to do that. Instead, we could give them choices. For example, we can say, do you want to mow the lawn or do you want to do the laundry? And then they're able to make that decision themselves, make their choice, whatever one they prefer. Another statement you can use is, as long as your room is clean, or if your room is clean, then you can go out with me to watch TV or shopping, maybe go out for ice cream, that type of thing. In the last example, you could say, I'm happy that your room is clean. If it is, you can go over to a friend's house. And then nutrition would be the next struggle. It's really important for them to eat appropriate things. A lot of times kids stay at the table forever, maybe just playing with their food and not eating. You could possibly say, dinner will be finished at 7:30, and that's when I'm going to clean up. If you're playing around, maybe give them some warnings 5 or 10 minutes prior to that end time. Let them know they need to finish soon. Another struggle is with friends and dating. And a comment you can use is, you want to go over to your friend's house? That's absolutely fine. First, of course, I need to meet all of those friends. So I'll be able to trust them more and know who you'll be with. And of course, sometimes friends and dating can cause problems. There might be things that come up. One thing you can say, maybe sit down with your child and let them know that maybe, that this has caused a problem, but once you calm down and I calm down and your voice matches mine, we can sit and discuss this. Maybe another one would be outings. Set it up ahead of time. Set up the expectations for what you want their behavior to look like. And let them know if you want to be included in this outing, you have to meet these expectations that have been set up. And next. Screen time, it can be the computer, laptop, phone, Facebook, variety of different things. And again, same as before, give them the responsibility that you can have screen time when whatever it is needs to be done. Once that's finished, you can have screen time, whether it be eating dinner, homework. Also, it's really important to limit that as well, limit the screen time. I suggest maybe 2 hours for, younger kids, maybe 3 as they get older per day. And here's some visuals to help. You can possibly use index cards to set up the expectations maybe at a school or at the store. And if you see them doing something really good, maybe they're using the cart very appropriately, you catch them having that good behavior. And so you can bring those visual prompts as well to help them. And at home, you could use a star chart. You can put your expectations, what you want, maybe chores for them to finish, whatever work they need to finish. You may be talking with parents, talking with friends, siblings. And then once they get all those stars, at the end, they've earned what they want. Another example is maybe a calendar for the days of the week. Maybe on Monday, they brush their teeth, they eat, they go to dinner. You have that schedule set up. Once you have a star next to the behavior that they did very well, they get what they wanted, and if it's blank, they don't. And if there's specific behavior or struggle, you can focus on that on the chart. For example, maybe if parents, have a tendency to yell, or if the student has a tendency to yell and the student changes that behavior and speaks in a quiet voice, they could earn that sticker and put that on the chart. And then again, with chores, you can have specific things that they want at the end and give certain examples. And then once they meet that behavior, they get that. If they don't meet that, they don't get their reward at the end. And if the kids can read instead of pictures, you can substitute words for that. For older teenagers, more of a work schedule would be appropriate. And then again, still what they would want to do, and that would most likely be earning money. For example, if a student wanted to go horseback riding, and they're at home and asking the parents to do that, over and over again, maybe you can set up something, that maybe you're not listening to me, you take the word horse off. That means you can't go. If the word remains, it means that you've earned that. Or if there's just an H or something like that, it means you can go. So it's a nice visual way that they can add to that. And then if all of the letters are gone, you could say, okay, you need to wait until you approve your behavior. Once that happens, you put those letters back up. And a lot of times students want to go on Facebook. You could set something up because, of course, it needs Wi-Fi. So if the student wants the Wi-Fi code, you set up the expectations that these things need to be done prior to that. You need to finish your chores. You need to clean your room. Once all of those things are done, then as a parent, you'd be willing to give them that Wi-Fi code. They earn that. So that's a good idea for older kids. And obviously a big one with kids is allowance, that they'll earn money. Not that it's being given to them, but once they finish what is expected of them, then they would earn money for that. Same as at the workplace, they would earn a check as their reward for that. And we're almost done. So in closing, just make sure you confirm basic needs. Sometimes kids are sick or they didn't get enough sleep, and we just immediately are confronting the problem. It's not going to be successful. If you have those basic needs already met, then you'll be able to address the behavior. And encourage positive behaviors. It's very important to set up the expectations for what you want and make that clear. And always focus on the positive behaviors that they do show, not the negative ones. And we've given you tips that when the behavior is difficult, you set up those consequences. And again, refer back to the family time, that 30-minute rule that we talked about. And remember, with deaf kids, communication is so important. Maybe if you missed something that they said, or maybe you looked away, make sure you concentrate on what they're saying and you understand exactly what's being signed. And consequences, remember, unlike punishment, it's their choice. You're not just giving the punishment to them, they're earning their consequence. Setting limits and giving choices instead of punishment. Kathy talked about that before. And lastly, visual aids. Help remind them of certain things, the time limits that have been set. And for younger kids, it's easy. Just give them a paper, have them look, point to something instead of always preaching at them, explaining again. Just give them those visual cues and prompts. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully all of this has helped you.
Cookie. Cookie. Cookie.
Bake. 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 Do you want to bake cookies?
Yes. Sugar cookies are my favorite.
Okay, I need first flour, second eggs, third milk, fourth sugar.
Baking cookies is fun. Cookie. Cookie. Cookie.
Bake. Bake. Bake.